Hello class and welcome to section 2.1, which is about slope-intercept form. By the end of today's lesson, you will be able to write and graph equations in slope-intercept form. Slope-intercept form is one of the ways that we can write out linear equations. This chapter is going to give us three different options. Slope-intercept form is our first. The equation that we're going to follow in slope-intercept form is y equals mx plus b. As we learned in section 2.0, m stands for slope. So in our equation, this m stands for our slope. The b value is going to stand for our y-intercept. So for example, you might see an equation that says y equals negative 2x plus 4. That tells you that you have a slope of negative 2 and a y-intercept of negative 4. To remind you what the y-intercept is, that is the y-coordinate where a linear function crosses the y-axis. So if you were looking at the coordinate plane, when a line crosses the y-axis, the point where it hits, right here, is your y-intercept. That b comes from 0, b, that intercept point. When we are graphing, there's three simple steps. The first one is you are going to graph your y-intercept at the point 0, b. The second one, if necessary, you're going to make the slope a fraction and then use it to graph a second point. What I mean by make the slope a fraction is if your slope started as 2, you're going to want to turn it into 2 over 1. If your slope started as 3/4, it's already a fraction. You have nothing else to do with that. Then you're going to go ahead and connect the points with a straight line all the way through the edges of the graph. Some students tend to graph their 2 points and connect just between those points. Remember that a line goes on forever and ever and keeps extending, so we want to put arrows on the ends of our lines. And when we get later into algebra, it's going to become very important as we try and find where lines intersect, that we have the line across our whole graph so we can see how far it actually goes. So for example here, we've got y equals negative 3/4 x minus 5. First thing I'm going to do is find my y-intercept. So my y-intercept in this case is at 0, negative 5. So I'm going to come over to the graph and go over 0 and down 1, 2, 3, 4, down to negative 5. Then I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to look at what my slope is. In this case, my slope is already a fraction of negative 3/4. So from this point, this first point that we graphed, not from the origin, we're going to start counting down 1, 2, 3, and then positive 1, 2, 3, 4. That gives us a second point. You also could have, if you notice, there's only that one negative sign. So in this case, I chose to go down 3 and over 4. We also could have chose to go up 3 and 4 to the left. 1, 2, 3 up, 1, 2, 3, 4 to the left. If you notice, those points are on the same line. The last thing that we need to do is connect our points using a straight line, and we're going to want to go through all the way through the entire graph. So we need to connect our points. That's not perfectly straight yet, but we want to connect our points with our line, which is going to go through our points as soon as I finish adjusting it, and touch all of the points on our line. You also want to make sure, again, lines go on forever, so we have arrows on the ends of our line. Go ahead and try graphing this one on your own. Starting at your y-intercept of 0, 2, we have that first point, and then we go up to our second point, which is up 4 and right 5. You also could have done a second one by going down 1, 2, 3, 4, and left 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Again, using that slope in either direction will put you on that same line. Another thing that we want to be able to do is write the equation when we are given a graph. Similar to graphing, our first thing we're going to want to do is pick out our y-intercept. So in this case, our y-intercept is at 0, 1, so our b value is going to be 1. Then I'm going to want to look at my slope. In this case, to get from point to point, I'm going down 1, 2, 3, and over 1, 2, 3, 4. So my slope is -3/4. When I finish this problem, I'm going to end up with y equals -3/4 x plus 1, and that is the equation for my graph. Go ahead and try this one on your own. We find our slope, and we find our y-intercept. Put that together, we get 2/5 x minus 2. Another thing that we can do is write a linear equation if we are given 2 points. When we do this, our first job is going to be to find the slope. So I'm going to take my points, label them x1, y1, x2, y2. Following my slope equation, I'm going to do y2, which is 4, minus y1, which is -2, over 3 minus -1. Double negatives make a positive, which is going to give me a slope of 6 over 4, which can reduce to 3 over 2. So that's going to be my slope value. You now need to find the y-intercept. Since we have 2 points, we have 2 options for how to find that. Using the first point, I could say y, which is -2, equals my slope, which is 3/2, times x, which is -1, plus b. Or I could plug in a second option using my second point and say 4, which is y, is equal to 3/2 times 3, which is x, plus b. Either way, we can go about solving these problems to find our y-intercept. If I come over here to the first one, I've got -2 equals -3/2 plus b. When I go ahead and add 3/2 to both sides, 3/2 is the same thing as 1/2. So -2 plus 1/2 gives me -1/2 as my b value. If I come over to using the second point, I've got 4 is equal to -3/2 times 3, which is -9/2. If I subtract -9/2, which is -4/2, I end up with 4 minus 4/2, which once again gives me -1/2 is equal to b. So either point that you use, we can plug back in to find our b value. And we end up with a final answer of y is equal to 3/2 x minus 1/2, taking our slope and our y-intercept and plugging them into the equation. Go ahead and try this one on your own. Again, we find our slope first. We plug in either of our points and find out in this case our b value is going to be 5 2/3. If you said 5.6 repeating, that is also okay. And then we end up with -1/3 x plus 5 2/3. Last thing we're going to talk about here is a word problem. Alice has a gift card to the local coffee shop. Every time she goes to the shop, she gets medium coffee. The graph shows the gift card balance at 2 points. How can Allie use this information to determine the cost of a medium coffee? So if we're looking at our equation, y equals mx plus b, when you're looking at this type of equation, your cost per something is going to end up being your slope. That's how much you're changing by. In this case, she's changing by each coffee that she purchases. So that slope, that change is what we're looking for. In order to find it, we're going to go ahead and say, use our 2 points. So our second y minus our first y, y2 minus y1, over x2 minus x1. And when I do that subtraction, I'm going to get -5.3 over 2, which can be reduced to -2.65 over 1. This means that for every medium coffee she buys, it's going to cost her $2.65. That's how much she's going down by every time, so that's the cost of her coffee. Now we want to know now Allie wants to know the original value of the gift card. So if we go back, the slope stood for our change, or the cost of a coffee. The original value of the gift card, or the original value in any problem, is going to be found in that y-intercept. So now Allie wants to know the original value of the gift card. How can she use this information to determine the value? Well, we figured out that the slope was negative 2.65, so go ahead and use that information to solve this on your own and find the b value. Once you solve this using either of the 2 points, you're going to find that b is 25, so the original value of the gift card was $25. If you have questions about this or anything else from the lesson, please let me know when you get to class.